video is brought to you by salt. I've had this idea floating around in my head for a while. I made the meme to match, so now it's just gotta happen. These books are good. You guys are just mean. So a question a lot of people get asked or ask other people, like within a tag or I guess just as a Q&A type thing, is what is a book that you have read that you liked but everyone else hates? It's a pretty basic question. So I figured I would make an entire video out of it. But really, it's just the idea that this book is good. Y'all are just mean. And that's not in the sense of like accusing people of not reading it correctly or like my opinion's better than yours. I think it's just a fun way to talk about books that I really liked that have a really bad rep, but people stopped recommending it or gave it low ratings for whatever reason, and I think it's not deserving of that. So hopefully I can inspire you to give these books a second chance if you maybe wanted to read it then didn't. This is your call to take those books out of your unhaul pile or to put it back on your wish list, because I think they're worth it, and you need to not listen to the mean people who tell you it's not worth it. So I have 5 books to talk about today that I think get a pretty bad reputation for people saying like, but they're not bad, okay? At least to me. In an objective sense, who's to say? The first book I want to talk about is probably the book that inspired this video, but I'm just gonna come out and say it. I didn't mind, I almost said The Cruel Prince. What book is this? The Cursed Child. Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which is the screenplay book that came out after, like it's set after the series with Harry Potter's kids in it, and it's a Broadway play, or it was in the UK. I don't know what the UK equivalent of Broadway is, but this book is just about Harry Potter's kids and going back to Hogwarts and new experiences. And I get why people don't like it, staying spoiler free. I get why it kind of changes the landmarks of the original series and shifts how you would approach the original series, but I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was fun. I thought that it added a lot of new information to the series. I thought that it brought back some characters that I was really excited to see. I think it was interesting to see the lives of their children and their relationships with one another and how that related to their parents growing up at Hogwarts. That's not something that ruined Harry Potter for me, but I totally say that from the angle of I read Harry Potter when I was 15. It's not something that like I'm ride or die for. I love Harry Potter. I get why people could like this if it was something that's so ingrained in them from childhood that they don't want anything touching it. So I get why people don't like it, but you're mean. It's fine. It's good. So yeah, anyone shying away from reading this book because they're like, oh no, I heard it was bad. At least if you're not like a hardcore Harry Potter person, I say give it a try. It was fun. It was good. If anything, the screenplay weirdness of it was just the hardest thing to get over, but I really do not have a problem with this book like a lot of BookTube does, pretending that it doesn't exist, which I don't look down on at all. I just think it's interesting that I thought it was fine, but then again, I'm not a hardcore fan of the original, so who's to say? That's just the memo of this video, is who's to say? The next book I have to talk about is The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer. This book isn't necessarily hated, but there is the reputation that the series isn't that good. And if we're talking about this spin-off series about Noah Shaw, yeah, it's garbage. Leave it. But the original trilogy, and especially these first I almost said 3 books, but it's 2 books. Anyway, this book, guys, it's so good. It's worth it. This book is about this girl named Mara Dyer who has the ability to just kill things, and she doesn't know why or how that manifested. And it's about her meeting this guy who has this power that sort of interacts with hers, and just their weird dynamic between them with their magical abilities. And this just is such a twisted book. It's kind of like this dark paranormal thriller where you don't really know why she has these powers, when they happen, how they happen. She kind of doesn't have control of them. And so the series just follows her figuring out, where did it come from? Is this an ancestral thing? And then moving on to like, how does this person and I have corresponding powers, and like, why are we linked? It's so good. And everyone doesn't read it because they hear the 3rd book isn't that bad, blah 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 blah. The 3rd book is fine, okay? Just don't read the spin-off. That's where it goes diarrhea. But this original trilogy is amazing, and I love these characters, and the way that it's written is just totally messes with your head. The romance is really cute and sweet. Clearly I have a lot of tabs in here because there's a lot of witty dialogue. The side character in this book is literally like, if you like Kenji from Shatter Me, Jamie is literally Kenji from Shatter Me. It's intense, but there's moments of lightness and humor and intrigue. I'm not a fan of thriller, y'all know that about me, but I love paranormal stuff, and this was very dark and it's fantastic. This book is good. Y'all are just mean. I forgot I wanted to talk about this one. It's good, y'all are just mean. This series gets a lot of bad flack because the first one is so great and then they start to dwindle in quality, in comprehension, but it's worth it, okay? Just sit down, be quiet, it's fine. This is a series about a young girl named Cassie who exists when the apocalypse happens. So these aliens come to Earth, they are wreaking havoc, she's having to survive by herself on the streets, and then she meets a boy, and he's a lumberjack, and he smells like chocolate, and he's so beautiful and hot. That was 16-year-old me jumping out to give this review because I read this quite a bit ago, but every single memory I have of it is lasting in that it is so well fleshed and realistic of a story with that amazing strong character, with that romance that just from the gods. Great cast of side characters. This book talks about periods and like real stuff that happens in real life included in an apocalyptic novel. It's amazing. It's so good. It's so fun and festive. Book 2 is confusing. I have not read book 3 yet. It's on my list of stuff to read because it's one of my longest owned books that I still haven't read. But it's still worth reading the first one, even if you're going to pretend it's a standalone, just because I think this confronts a lot of topics in a way that really isn't discussed in YA, especially apocalyptic literature. I don't want to beat a dead horse and just say the same things over and over, but that's definitely the reason I think you should read this, because it's not as bad as you think. You're just mean. Another book that I'm here to defend is the Shiver trilogy. There's like 5 books now, but the Shiver trilogy by Maggie Stiefvater. I will say the second and third books are currently in my unhaul box because I'm not keeping them. But this series, as one of the first things I ever read in YA, I think this copy is literally from like 2012 or 2013, so it's kind of maybe sentimental for me. That's the only reason it's here. But I think Maggie Stiefvater is so praised for her more recent series like The Raven Boys, which I definitely think deserves that hype. And this sort of falls into the background of that because it's one of her earlier works. A lot of people say it's weaker writing, it's a very generic story. You know, they're right. But I think this book is still a lot better than people say it is. I think maybe people don't dislike this book, but it's definitely in that category of like, oh, it's not that good, you don't have to pick it up. I would say pick it up because this is a werewolf story about this guy named Sam. The main character, what's her face? Grace finds Sam on her back porch, half dead, naked, and she's like, huh? And it's a werewolf book about stuff. Maybe it was because this is one of the first books in YA I read. I have not reread it since then. But this, to this date, is still one of the softest books I've ever read. The fact that so many of the scenes in this book stuck with me, I think is really telling to show that there were a lot of powerful moments in this book. I think the characters were written so realistically. Like, if you've read a Maggie Stiefvater book, you know her character development and the development of her plots. I think that this one had the bones and the structure of what her future books, like this book walked so that the Raven Boys could run. But I still think that this book is so deserving of recognition. If anything, it's quick and it's easy and it might be cheesy, but it's heartwarmingly cheesy. It's not like, ugh, you know? So I'm starting a new Facebook group called Defense Squad for the Shiver trilogy, even though only book 1 I'm keeping because the other 2 were kind of boring and they were about characters that we didn't really care about. But read book 1. Come on, get a library card, it's okay. This next one honestly like doesn't deserve the mention, but we're here. I'm not gonna sit here and say like this series is flawless and like the people who hate it are wrong, because that's not what I'm trying to imply at all. But Twilight, it's not bad. I see a lot of criticisms of this book of just people who hate it right off the bat, being like, the writing is horrible, this part of it is bad, the glittery vampire thing is cheesy and obnoxious. And I'm just here to say, I mean, there's definitely parts of it that are so outdated and the relationship has not wonderful parts of it, and I'm not defending Twilight like it's the best book to ever grace YA ever, but I think it needs recognition for the fact that it pioneered the YA genre. This literally caused an outbreak of teenagers caring about reading, and like the impact it had on reading, and like this is the first book that I ever read that I was like, ugh, reading is fun, I have a book boyfriend now. And just there's little things inside this book, in this series, that I think, even though it's surrounded by a lot of crap, I think it's valuable. So I remember whenever I read this when I was like 13. One of the things that stuck with me and like to this day is one of the things that I think about that I looked up to Bella for whenever I originally read this series is she is so mature and independent for being a 17-year-old. I just remember like the way that she takes care of Charlie in this book is so touching. Like, even I think people kind of glorify this book because it just has boys and relationships in it, but if you think about the other things that exist in this book as well, like the side characters and their backstories, who here wouldn't die for Rosalie? If so, unsubscribe down below. Thanks, bye. All the side characters are so tremendous, and Charlie and Bella's relationship is so meaningful, and there's so much about that like there are some parts that she's not great, but I think Bella also does learn from her mistakes, and she has personality flaws, like, I don't know, willing to die for the dick, but also I really looked up to her, and I might even still do, just because of her resilience, the way that she so strong-headedly knew what she wanted for herself, for her child, for her relationship, for her life. But I'm just saying, like, there are things that people come out and attack about Twilight being horrendous. I don't think the writing of this book is abysmal. There's parts of it that I think are gross and weird, but I think as a whole, I don't think the Twilight series is awful. And I'm very biased because, again, it's like, you know what, it's like my Harry Potter. Some people hated The Cursed Child because they read Harry Potter as a kid, and I'm just sitting here willing to defend Twilight somewhat. Was it even smart to talk about this? I feel like this is just going to invite a lot of people telling me I'm wrong, but long story short, this book just gets a lot of bad hype from people saying, maybe even people who haven't read it and just watched the movies, that assume that it's bad, or they take things out of context, or why am I justifying why Twilight is good? What is this video? I'm just meaning to say, there's a lot of people who will troll and say it's bad just because they haven't read it, they don't care, and they think it's horrible. If you read it, there's parts of it that redeem it, okay? That's what I'm saying. There's parts that are redemptious. Redemptious? Kind of worked. Lastly, I want to talk about a book that you probably haven't heard of, but when I go to Goodreads and I sort all the books that I've read by like the books that are rated the lowest, this book has like a 2.5 star rating on Goodreads, and I gave it 5 stars. So I just want to mention that because I think it's very strange. But the book is called The Art of Sleeping Alone by Sophie Fontanelle, which is a memoir about this woman that stopped having sex for a year, and it was kind of her adventure of learning to grow and love herself first and put herself first instead of just relying on physical connection with people. And there's no slut shaming in it. There's no bad, outright problematic things in it. It's not boring, it's not weird, but every single review talks about how it seemed like self-indulgent and she was just going on and on about herself and all this different stuff, and I'm like, it's a memoir. Are you high? This book has such bad reviews, and I really liked it. I think it was a good like self-reflection type book that talked about here's what other people were experiencing and what she witnessed around her and what she had gone through, and here's what she did to kind of go on this journey and see, hey, could I do this for a year and see how it affects me? And then talks about the results. It talks about important stuff, and it doesn't do it in a way that's judgmental at all. So I really don't know why it has such bad reviews. In conclusion, this book is good. You're just mean. Now that I've spent a couple minutes defending Twilight, that's all that I have to talk about today. Truly, this video isn't meant for me to be like, other people are wrong, but I think it was just a fun poke at, here's some books that other people are really adamantly against, and I'm just here to say I didn't mind them, so maybe it'll give you the inspiration to want to read some of them. If not, maybe like stop harboring resentment for things that truly aren't that bad. I don't know if this video is gonna flop because everyone's just mad that I'm sitting here hyping their least favorite books, or maybe some people agree with me. Let me know how you felt about this down below. If I should just delete this video, I don't know. Okay, thank you for watching. Have a good one.